Hello and welcome into BTN's Take 10 podcast. This is Alex Roux of BTN. We're back on the Take 10 podcast ahead of the holiday break coming up here. I'm sure a lot of people are traveling, a lot of people are relaxing, watching sports. We got bowl season coming up, and we got gift season coming up. So this episode is actually a great opportunity to potentially plant a gift idea in some you Big Ten fans out there, because we have Ed Sherman back on the show. Ed joined us back in the spring when he was kind of doing a preliminary book promotion for his Big Ten book that recently came out. It's kind of a comprehensive encyclopedia, coffee table style book on the history of the Big Ten Conference, and we welcome him back to the show for this episode now that the book is out, and he talked more in depth about what's in his big project. The book is called This Is Big, and how the process has gone in marketing the book himself, promoting it, and basically how it makes for a really cool collectible and piece of literature for Big Ten fans out there. So got Ed Sherman on for about 20 minutes to chat about Big Ten history, and appreciate him coming back on. And then after that, we welcomed Harold Shelton back to the show after a week-long break. If you've not listened to the show before, Harold is our researcher here at BTN who regularly joins the show pretty much every week to talk about Big Ten basketball and Big Ten football in depth, usually every team, most teams, if not every team. And today we went extra long with Harold because there is a whole bowl season coming up that we probably will not get to chat about until after most of them are over. And there is plenty of Big Ten basketball to talk about, with every team having played by the end of Wednesday 2 Big Ten conference games, getting their 2 December Big Ten conference games out of the way before we pick back up with conference play in January. So a ton to talk about with Harold. That'll come up after Ed Sherman's interview, which we will get to right now. Once again, Ed's a longtime Chicago sports writer, wrote for the Chicago Tribune, and now has published a all-encompassing book on the history of the Big Ten, and he's on to talk about it. That interview starts right now. I'm very pleased to welcome Ed Sherman back to the show. He's a longtime Chicago sports writer and author who has recently published a book called This Is Big, How the Big Ten Set the Standard in College Sports. Ed, how is your holiday season going? You seem quite busy.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a different kind of holiday season, that's for sure. To have a book out and be able to talk about it with people like you that's kind of the fun of doing something like this. You get to share what you've done with with everyone.
Yeah, congrats on getting the book out. And since I last had you on, I think it was in March, the book was not yet published back then. So I'm curious, how much work has gone into the whole process during kind of the home stretch here, and what goes into taking a book across the finish line with promoting, distributing, and all that?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. Since this is the first time I oversaw the production of a book. The Big Ten is the publisher, but I basically oversaw the production of the book, till the end. I kind of I thought things were going really smoothly until in June and up until May, and I'm like thinking things are going too smoothly, and then sure enough, the last 10% felt like climbing the last 1,000 feet at Mount Everest without any oxygen. It was really, it was a lot of work to get it to the finish line, but definitely, and a lot of people helping out, including people at the Big Ten, to make this possible, to make this the best possible book, to lock it down and to make sure everything was perfect and got it just right. And so the end result was definitely worth it.
Yeah, you've been running around doing a lot of media appearances. Like we said, it's during a busy time of year, the holidays. What's been maybe the hardest or most unexpected part of doing so much of the legwork on your own?
I don't know if it's been hard. I think it's been really very gratifying to have, to see the reaction of people who, want the book. Somebody just sent me a copy of the book. I don't know how they got my address and asked me to send me a copy they put $20 in there from Texas and asked me to sign it to her husband and send it back. And I don't really know this person. I have no idea how. I just opened this up, just got their address. How they got my address, I'm not exactly sure. But that's the kind of stuff that's been, that's a neat thing, that someone is reaching out to you. They want your autograph. Just earlier, a friend of mine, someone I knew, bought 8 books, and they wanted me to autograph them, and so we went and met this morning and did that. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's really neat and exciting. And, it's all about just trying to get the word out, and there's so many different platforms, but you also are competing with a lot of different people who are also, trying to, you're reaching. I think there's more platforms, but there's also a lot of competition to get people's attention. And so I think that's been probably the biggest challenge. And so thankfully, with people like you and others, we are getting the word out because we are starting. We have had a nice response to people buying the book.
Yeah, and we'll get into some more early feedback. I'm going to ask you about that in just a little bit. But for those who maybe didn't listen when I had you on back in March or who haven't heard what the book is all about yet, can you kind of fill the audience in on just what the book is and what sets it apart from maybe anything else like it?
Well, I think what sets it apart, it's 352 pages. It's a big book, literally big. It weighs 5 pounds, so you're going to feel it when you pick it up. But it's a big book, as we've been saying, for a big conference. It's 352 pages, more than 300 photos. So there's got that coffee table feel to it. I mean, it's a coffee table sized book, but there's also 80,000 words of type in there. So I call it like a hybrid because the photos are spectacular. We did more photos than we expanded the book by almost 100 pages because we had so many great photos. We felt like we had to use them, and they helped tell the story. But I also didn't want the entries to read like, short caption or like a Wikipedia encyclopedia entry. I really wanted to do some storytelling, and I really think I did in many ways, telling the many stories of what made the Big Ten unique. Why? And the essential question is what made the Big Ten what it is, and I try to answer that in the book in many ways through key developments and things that kind of define the conference over time, iconic athletes and coaches, of which there are many in the Big Ten, and then through a timeline, and then each school has a 4-page section where I highlight more athletes and coaches that you're going to go, oh, I didn't realize that guy went there, or this guy went to that school, and I think that was kind of an interesting part of the book too. So a lot of different ways of just trying to say that this has been a conference that has a tremendous amount of history. It dates back to 1895, and I don't know that I got everything in the book. I think that would be impossible, but I think I got a lot of it in there.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I got my copy, and it is massive, and you fans out there can get their copy at big10book.com. So kind of back to the feedback you were talking about, what have you heard from either fans or other members in the media so far about some of the reception you've gotten back on the book? I know Jim Delaney was involved. I've seen other high-profile people in sports media sharing their copies. So what's been the feedback? What's the feedback been like?
Well, I worked very close with the conference, and that's something I really am stressing, that Jim Delaney, I brought this idea to them in June of about 2017. Let's do a history book, and they were all in. And obviously they're publishing the book, but it's more than just publishing, putting their money behind it. I mean, they really, the support that I got from the conference, from Jim Delaney on down, I say it's been overwhelming. I mean, it still is overwhelming to me how much enthusiasm and passion and energy they put into making this book come out. So I'm very thankful for that. And I think the reaction I'm getting is that people are, I don't think they expected this kind of a book. I mean, I think and I don't know how you felt, Alex, when you got it, your copy, but I've been actually making a point of, when I do these radio interviews, trying to get a copy of the book into people's hands, and the reaction generally is, "Wow, I didn't expect this." I mean, they're very impressed. And I think that the photography. I think people love the photography. Some great photos in the book. As I said, we had so many great photos that we blew out the book. We added 100 pages, and we did these montages throughout the book that kind of get at the culture and the vibe of being in the Big Ten with fans and the bands and the cheerleaders and mascots, and got a great montage of just terrific pictures of celebrations of the moment the teams won the title, and just the great shots of teams celebrating. So just a lot in the book. But I think that the overall impression is people really enjoy the book, and my designer also, I give him a lot of credit. He did a great job making this book look like a piece of art.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm curious, have there been any stories or parts of the book that have especially maybe resonated with somebody that you've talked to, an anecdote that you've included in the book people didn't know about? Because I know you mentioned on our last interview that there's plenty of little nuggets in there that people might not have known about before.
Well, I think people are, starting to read the book and they see different things, and I think that I think there's a lot of, God, I didn't know this guy went to that school, or I forgot that this guy played there. You look at I do a section on multi-sport athletes, and it's an incredible list of athletes and guys who played other sports that you don't even think of. Dave Winfield, who went to Minnesota, and obviously a Hall of Fame baseball player, but we have him pictured playing basketball. He was a starting forward for the Gophers, and he was actually, even though he didn't play football, he was actually drafted in the NFL. He's the only athlete, I believe, who was ever drafted in all three sports, and they were just because he was such an incredible athlete. Kirk Gibson, I have pictured in the book, not as a great baseball player, but he was a phenomenal football player at Michigan State, great receiver. And so, you see things like that, and it's kind of like, wow, that kind of didn't realize that that happened. And also, I think a little bit of, again, you talk about trying to put some of these things in context, and you look at Penn State, and it's fun. It's fun to talk to someone today who was a Penn State guy who never, I'm older obviously, and I can remember, well, for most of my life, Penn State was an independent for a long time, and this person never knew anything but Penn State being in the Big Ten because it's going on 30 years. So a lot of things like that you kind of, when you see it on paper and you see the pictures and kind of the timeline that goes along with it, it really kind of strikes how much history has gone in the conference and what has made the conference what it is.
Yeah, and speaking of Penn State, I know you get into this in the book, but was there ever a consideration of changing the name of the Big Ten when Penn State was added? Because, you look at like the Pac-10 changed to the Pac-12, but the Big Ten has kept that iconic brand. How did that all play out?
So that's a great question, because that's kind of when people ask, what was my goal for the book? I kind of go back to this, and I write about this I have a section in the book on the Penn State just an expansion keying off of Penn State, and obviously going to Nebraska, Rutgers, and Maryland, and why that was such a huge turning, huge moment for the Big Ten. And there's a sidebar when Jim Delaney talks about, he had just started at the Big Ten when it was when they expanded, wasn't kind of imbued fully in the culture and what the Big Ten meant. He was just a new commissioner, and so his natural question when Penn State was added was, okay, what are we going to change the name to? Because obviously the Big Ten was no longer 10, it was going to be 11. And he got this immediate feedback from people, this blowback from people, we're not changing the name. We're the Big Ten. And even Penn State said, we joined the Big Ten. And, obviously at that moment, he realized, as did others, that the Big Ten was more than just a number. It was a culture, it was a brand, it meant something to people. And that's what I kind of tried to get at in the book. What is the Big Ten? Why is that label so significant? And why has it remained the Big Ten even though now there's 14 schools? Because it means more than a number. It means a whole almost 130 years of history, and its place in sports is, in college sports and in sports in general is, right at the top of the upper, at the top of the elite of the elite.
Yeah, I'm glad that decision was made not to change the name, because now you look at it and the logo and the branding, it's right there in the front of your book. It's just very even, very symmetrical. I think the logo is genius with the 1G looking like a 10 and also spelling out the name. I think Big Ten's done a great job just branding overall over the years. And I'm just curious, what were some of your main resources when doing the research for the book? Because until now, there aren't that many comprehensive resources out there. There's no encyclopedia. So how did you handle kind of that mountain of research?
Well, there actually were two history books. There was one written in the late 1960s by the second commissioner, Tuck Wilson, wrote a book in which he not only documented about the first 70 years of the conference, but he also gave his views. And then 1995, in the 100th anniversary, my old friend from the University of Illinois, Dale Ratterman, did a book again, kind of going year by year, looking at the key events for that year. So I had a little bit of a timeline of things to kind of draw upon. That really helped greatly. I took content from Big Ten Network, especially from their Icon TV series, which I credit in the book. They gave me for those Icon athlete coach stories. I got a lot of contact from that, and just in general, then I have a pretty long bibliography in the book. I mean, there's just so much out there, and it's, compared to when those other guys did the book, now you just do a Google search and boom, you have everything. Google's our best friend these days. If you're a historian like I am, it's very easy to find a lot of stuff, and so that was fun, kind of trying to find stuff, and then, the other part was finding stuff that you didn't know, and you went, wow, I didn't know that, and so, that was very enjoyable to do that.
Yeah, we talked about the origins of Big Ten Network when you were on the show last time. Your book gets us into that quite a bit as well. So I'm curious what you think the impact of BTN has had on, not just the strength of the conference, but on college athletics in general. Because I look at it and you see, you have Minnesota and Indiana this year having breakout years in football. You got basketball programs like Rutgers digging themselves out of what's been a bad history. And I think the lucrative TV contracts have a lot to do with these trends. So I'm wondering how much you think the network plays into that.
Tremendous, a ton. Quickly, it's huge. It's been a complete game changer for the Big Ten, and I write about that again. That when you talk about turning point moments, I have a long section on the founding of the Big Ten, and Jim Delaney gives the backstory about how the network really was founded or created off of him being underwhelmed by an initial offer from ESPN in the early 2000s when their TV deal was up, and he said, I'm going to do this. I don't like what you're offering me. He had played around with the idea of doing a network, and he went ahead and did it, and everyone kind of scoffed. Yeah, good luck with that. Who's going to watch a network on one conference? How are you going to fill up the programming? And very famously, I write about the trouble they had getting distribution on the cable systems, and how there was that the cable companies didn't buy in until they went on the air in 2007, and people heard or saw what they were missing, and they demanded getting it on the system. And since then, it's just been a huge success financially. I mean, it goes without saying, it's a huge windfall for the conferences, but even more so from the aspect of exposure, of getting not only football and basketball, but some of these other sports, volleyball, wrestling, have been huge popular sports on these networks. They developed these following that they never really had before beyond the core fan of that sport. And so that's been huge. I think the exposure being coast to coast. I have two brothers who live in California, and they're able to watch Illinois games. They both went to Illinois, when that air on Big Ten Network. So that exposure, you can't, what number do you put on that? It's a huge number. So I think it's been a complete game changer, and it's, obviously, with everyone else, other conferences soon try to follow suit with their own networks, but none has done it quite as well as the Big Ten.
Sticking with the theme of the changes that TV has kind of brought about, I see some complaints, especially working in social media, a lot of complaints from fans and sometimes more traditional sports writers about some of the shifts, like 20 conference basketball games or especially Friday night football games. That gets a lot of negative feedback. So as a sports writer yourself, what do you think about some of those other changes that have helped bring exposure and the impacts they've had?
Well, I think so. I think it's kind of, again, what the market brings, what the market demands, and how much the conference, how much the sports entity wants to do as far as trying to maximize profits, maximize demand, versus maintaining tradition. It's a very delicate balance, but I do think that, that everything begins and ends with, all change is kind of difficult to accept in the beginning. It just feels different, and I think that after a while, people come to accept it, and I think that's what you're kind of getting a little bit now with what the Big Ten's doing with some of their changes. I like having more conference basketball games. I don't know why people would complain about that. I think the conference is terrific, and conference basketball is Big Ten basketball is great. It's going to be a great Big Ten. You're already started. You can see that there's so many teams that are competitive and close. I think it's going to be just a terrific slate of Big Ten games, and every night you play. So I would want that. The Friday night games. I mean, again, people. I think that if you're playing in it, you might not like it. But if you're sitting at home on a Friday night, and you're want to watch a Big Ten game, it's nice to have on. So again, it's kind of what they want, what people want. What the conference wants to do is try to maximize their exposure. It gives them another slot to kind of showcase Big Ten football. And so while people might complain about it, it also helps them on the other end as far as giving them that exposure that that helps grow the program, maybe with recruits and more donor dollars, more people being interested, saying, "Hey, I'm watching the game. I want to go there next time." So pluses and minuses to everything.
Yep, and speaking of exposure, with the holidays in full swing, how long does the book tour go on for you? What is your schedule looking like? Is the Blitz going to continue through the winter here?
Yeah, I don't know about a Blitz, but, I'm trying to get the word out, especially with the holidays. People hopefully will think about not only the book for themselves, but I think I've been kind of saying you're one click away from getting that perfect gift for the sports fan by going to BigTenBook.com. I think I've signed a lot of books for people that have bought it as gifts because they know that their sports fan is going to really enjoy it. A Big Ten fan's really going to enjoy it. Someone who went to Illinois or Northwestern, or Ohio State. I want to stress there's content in every school in the book, and I tried to kind of even it out. Obviously, there's some more than others, but there's going to be something for everyone to read in the book from every Big Ten school, and that was something I really wanted to do because the conference is made up of 14 schools, and so I wanted every school to be represented.
Absolutely, and once again, you can get This Is Big at BigTenBook.com. It looks great, like you said, on a coffee table, a mantle, and then when you pop it open, it's got all the Big Ten knowledge you'll ever need. So, Ed, appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much for taking the time, and best of luck with the rest of the book tour here.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah.
All right, thanks once again to Ed for jumping back on the show. Always good chatting with him. Very knowledgeable and very cool project that he deserves a lot of credit and a lot of praise for completing and for getting out there to make everyone out there aware of the book that is available now. So like we talked about, BigTenBook.com. All right, I'll toss it over now to Harold Shelton, our in-house researcher here at BTN. Harold, a big part of the show. Have him on nearly weekly to chat in depth about Big Ten basketball and football, and we do just that coming up here over the next 40 minutes or so. So I'll toss it over to H, as we call him, for some deep Big Ten basketball, Big Ten football talk. That discussion starts right now. All right, back again in the lab with Harold Shelton. Took a week off last week. It was your birthday week, H. First of all, happy belated. Second of all, how was your special day?
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It was good. Definitely enjoyed it. It was my Rasheed Wallace year, 36. So definitely enjoyed it. Holiday party fell on my birthday, so that was a good way to spend it. My wife actually threw me a surprise party on that Saturday, so I had a lot of people by the house. Definitely shout out to her for that.
Good to let off some steam before today, National Signing Day, which I know is kind of places quite the burden on your shoulders, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, it's a long day. I mean, I don't know if it's any more stressful than like a normal college football week, but just that particular day of 6 hours of television, constantly hitting refresh on the 247 page to see, which teams moved up or down, if there's a new commit. Nebraska made my life really interesting considering they got like 3 guys today, and that kind of, influenced how they were ranked throughout the day. But, I know it's a huge thing in college football, and I know it's a very important piece, and we got to do our job and cover it correctly.
Yeah, recruiting's wild, man. Like, that's kind of how I got my start covering college sports when I was in college, and I'm glad I don't have to do it more than a couple of days of the year now because it's a racket and it never stops.
Yeah, it never stops. I mean, college football is pretty much 11-month-a-year job. When before, you recruit a little bit here and there, but I mean it's constant. I mean, I remember hearing Urban Meyer talk about how he was just constantly recruiting. Like after they won a national title, like he was literally on the phone, on the field, calling recruits. Like it literally never stops.
Yeah. So we won't. With that being said, we won't belabor the point here and talk any more about it. Everyone can check out BTN's coverage on social media or on our reruns. And I want to kick it over to basketball before we talk more football because the bowl season for the Big Ten is still a little over a week away. And, it's the holidays, so hopefully you're getting a little more time off, time to relax now with the crazy season in the rearview mirror. But hoops is still kind of in full swing. This week is pretty quiet, but we've had some eventful past couple of weeks. So interesting note, actually, that we'll start off with because it's kind of stats-oriented. This will be outdated by the time it comes out on Thursday, but we're heading into Wednesday night with Northwestern and Michigan State facing off. And if Michigan State loses, every team would be 1-1 in conference after tonight. I don't think that's ever happened, or it's pretty rare, right?
Well, just the fact that all of 13 home teams have won in those games, which is crazy. Wild I know that hasn't happened in at least the last 20 years that a conference actually had its home teams win its first 13 conference games. I know that for sure hasn't happened in this century in any league. And so the fact that we've been able to see that, we've seen 3 AP top 5 teams lose to unranked teams on the road. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, the major players holding serve. It's Penn State pounding Maryland. It's Illinois, beating up on Michigan. It's Minnesota beating up on Ohio State. I mean, of those 13 wins, 8 have been by double digits. So, I mean, there's been very few nail biters, down in the wire type games. The home teams have taken care of business, and it doesn't matter which team has been ranked. That hadn't seemed to matter at all.
Right. The interesting thing, just following tonight's game, is how unpredictable Northwestern has been. I don't expect them to beat Michigan State, but with the nature of the league and the nature of that team in particular, who knows? Maybe it'll be a 14-0 run for the home team and a 14-way tie at top Big Ten. That'd be kind of wild. That
would be wild. I mean, the fact that, on Monday I was able to wake up and see Michigan State atop the standings by themselves at 1-0 right. was pretty crazy. Again, hopefully, as a Michigan State fan, hopefully they are 2-0 and Northwestern is 0-2 and everybody else is 1-1. With the unpredictability of the league, I wouldn't say anything would shock me. I think Michigan State's still trying to figure a lot of things out. And so, if they sleepwalk in this game, they might get beat.
Yeah, I want to get a little deeper into Michigan State in just a moment, but talking about the ranked teams, they've been one of 4 Big Ten teams ranked in the top 5. And then speaking of that, Penn State finds itself in the rankings for the first time since, I think, 96, right? Yep. A huge accomplishment for them. Were they the longest drought in the Big Ten? Or I guess if you count Rutgers, they might have not been ranked since the early 90s. Or if not terms of, ever. But.
Yeah, Rutgers has definitely been ranked, but it's been a long time. The fact that Penn State got there. And just imagine where they would be if they didn't blow the Ole Miss game.
Exactly.
I mean, it's crazy considering how well they've played this year. You have the Maryland win, the Georgetown win on the road, the Syracuse win on the neutral site. They came back to beat Alabama over the weekend. The one thing that's normally been a bugaboo for them in the Pat Chambers era is they've had a home game that they lose that they shouldn't lose.
I thought the Alabama one might be that one.
I thought the Alabama one, the Yale one had a chance.
Yes, the Yale one was early in the season. I thought that thing could damage their tournament hopes, before they even really got off the ground. But they've kind of survived those 2 scares.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Like when you fully enter conference play, you want to have a gaudy record because you're going to pick up losses in a competitive league. And what's hurt them is that they've pulled off upsets against good Big Ten teams in the past, but they've had so many black marks on their resume in non-conference that they weren't able to overcome that to make the tournament. They don't have those this year. I think they played Central Connecticut on Friday, and I think that's the last non-conference opponent they really play. They might have one more after that, but the fact that they don't have any blemishes that are, like gaudy, I think will certainly help their tournament case.
Yeah, so congrats to Pat Chambers for getting them off to such a good start. Like, every year that I've been here, pretty much, it seems like Penn State was maybe about to break through. They had a lot of talent, but couldn't get in the tournament. This year, it looks like they're on the right path, as long as, like you said, they don't stumble unexpectedly. And then, of course, I like Pat Chambers because he has called me on more than one occasion Justin Timberlake, so I'll take that compliment. And, I'll give him as much good press as he wants. So shout out to Pat. Another team that has been, after an early setback, that has been pretty impressive is Iowa, especially with Luka Garza. Kind of a double-edged sword now because Jordan Bohannon has to take a seat for the rest of the season. He's going to redshirt. But do you think Iowa is a team with staying power even despite Bohannon's loss? I mean, Garza has been probably a big breakout star in college basketball. They can still score, and they've had some big wins as well.
I feel like Iowa's a team where if you catch them on the wrong night, things could go really, really poorly for you because, like you said, they can still score. Garza's a matchup nightmare. But even the fact, he scores 44 against Michigan and they give up 100 and they still lose by double digits. So that's the give and the take with Iowa. It's a team that can score, it's a team that can shoot, they like to play fast. But some nights they just don't feel like guarding you.
Right.
And so if they're in Carver Hawkeye and threes are falling and Garza's going to work and getting other teams' bigs in foul trouble, Iowa could pull off some upsets. We saw that last year. But then there are other times where threes aren't falling and, their zone's not working and they are kind of disinterested on that end of the floor and, you see them lose some games they shouldn't. So I think, probably bubble team at best unless they pull off some upsets.
How big of a loss is Bohannon? Because I know last year he was on that wild run, hitting all those clutch shots. This year, obviously not 100%. So how much production are they losing in him?
I think that's a huge loss. The fact that, like you said, he was captain clutch for them. I mean, we saw them pulled Iowa out of the fire a lot, whether it was Indiana twice, the Northwestern game. He would hit a lot of big shots. Was a guy you always had to respect from three, especially, off of offensive rebounds. He could pull it from anywhere. So I think they're going to have to be kind of more big-oriented with him out. I'll be curious to see how they play those first few games to try to get adjusted when he's not in there.
All right, so you were talking a little bit about Michigan State earlier, your squad, your alma mater, preseason number one. Do you have more confidence in this Michigan State team right now or Michigan, who has also had a couple losses back-to-back but got off to a great start early on?
So it's funny you asked that because I feel like Michigan State is really in a holding pattern. And I think that holding pattern could potentially last throughout the season because I truly feel, and this was kind of in my mind confirmed even more after reading the Free Press article about Cassius Winston over the weekend. I feel like the entire team is kind of, I won't say held back because that's not the best word for it, but they're kind of waiting to see how Cassius approaches everything because he's obviously going through a tragedy. There's no telling when he's going to, be able to respond from that. It might not be during the season. And so, during the article, you would read that basketball was his first love and that was this place where he can have fun and escape. And basketball isn't fun to him right now. Mm-hmm. And, during the Duke game, he wasn't really interested, and who can blame him? And so I feel like, the team kind of feeds off of him. He's their leader. He's the guy that picks everybody else up. And I feel like they're kind of tight because he's unsure of how to handle everything. And until that changes, I feel like they won't reach their full potential. Now, who knows? Maybe in a month, maybe in a week, maybe in 2 months, he's kind of sort of back to normal and things kind of fix themselves. But I really think we're in a wait and see with them. As for Michigan, I feel like that might be a bit of a market correction. I think that, after they beat up on Iowa State, they beat up on North Carolina.
He's not very good this year.
Right.
Yeah.
We see Iowa State, they get housed by Iowa at home. We've seen North Carolina, get housed by Ohio State at home, lose to Wofford at home.
The Gonzaga win is really impressive.
The Gonzaga win, that will hold for the whole year.
Yep.
Gonzaga got healthy, won at Arizona. Even though Michigan beat them when they had a couple guys out, I mean, they controlled that whole game, so I'm taking nothing away from them on that. that win will definitely have some shelf life. But we've seen them kind of struggle since Atlantis, and I feel like maybe they aren't the top 5 team, but they should still be, battling for a top 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had not read that article about Cassius Winston, but it kind of goes back to what we talked about maybe a month ago after Cassius's brother passed away, and you kind of said, what's going to happen when the cameras move on and the attention, shifts somewhere else, and Cassius still has to endure what he's going through. And, we're seeing it play out kind of right now. I wasn't aware of Cassius' mental state or how he's approaching this season, but like you said, basketball kind of takes a back seat regardless. And then in terms of Michigan, it's interesting because Franz Wagner and DeJulius, and I don't know if it extends to Livers because he's been their leading scorer, but some of the supplementary players like Wagner and DeJulius, like some nights they will show up and go off, and that's to be expected from young players. And some nights the bench is more quiet, and it falls on Livers, Teskey, and Simpson. So with them, I think they're going to be a little consistent, which I don't see any problem with in their first year under Howard. I think Juwan has done a good job keeping that team pretty even-keeled. He's always upbeat with the press. It doesn't seem to be stressing out on the sidelines. His demeanor is never flustered. So I think he'll do a good job keeping them balanced. It'll just be interesting to see how things progress, especially if things start to go south there. I don't think they will. I think they're a good team, and I think they'll make the tournament easily. But I just want to see how he manages a full season there.
Yeah, agreed. And I think Atlantis obviously was a gift and a curse. I mean, you win 3 high-profile games like that. Expectations were kind of low to begin the season because you didn't really know what to expect with Beeline gone and so many guys leaving and Howard, keeping everything close to the vest. You really didn't know what to expect at all from Michigan. So then they have that run in Atlantis, and you're like, oh, okay, this team, maybe they're top 5, top 10 team. They get hammered at Louisville. Illinois pretty much controls that whole game. They lose to Oregon at home, and Oregon didn't have one of their best players. And then also in that game, you see John Teskey barely see the floor because Oregon went small and basically took him out of the game. Xavier Simpson lost the point guard battle with Peyton Pritchard. And so things that they rely on, those veteran guys like you mentioned, didn't have good games in a big spot, and you just wonder if they can win games against good teams when that stuff happens.
Yeah, Pritchard reminded me of Cassius Winston a little bit. Just kind of an undersized guy who
controls tempo, controls pace,
got where he wanted to get. Took over when he needed to. That was an impressive game from Oregon. The theme has been top 5 teams losing, not just in the Big Ten, but across the sport. And another one lost. I didn't see this one coming at all. I didn't really get to watch this game either because I was watching NFL this past Sunday. But Ohio State losing at Minnesota. Marcus Carr kind of did what we'd been waiting for and more for Minnesota. And then I also didn't see or anticipate Nebraska beating Purdue. So it's interesting to see 2 teams in Nebraska and Minnesota who we thought would be pretty down this year, especially Nebraska, being capable of rising up and beating some of the upper tier teams in the conference.
Yeah, it's funny, when you saw Nebraska those first couple of games, and you're like, oof, I don't even know. I mean, can this team win more than 3 Big Ten games? Right. I mean, it looked really, really dire early. But it seemed like something clicked in that Indiana game to kind of figure some things out. If they protect the ball a little better, if they try a little harder on the boards, that they can be in some of these games because they play loose, they play free. And when shots are going in, obviously confidence goes up. And we've seen Fred Hoiberg win this way. But I just think they're going to be such an up-and-down team that you're going to have performances like the Indiana and the Purdue game. And then you're going to see them, struggle against some teams that they probably shouldn't struggle against. So I just think, kind of similar to the rest of the league where if you catch them on a good night, like, you might lose.
Right.
And there's going to be some other nights where you're like, how did this team beat Purdue? Because they look awful tonight. So I just think that's just going to be another place where you go in the Pinnacle Bank and you don't bring your A game, like, you can get beat. And as for Minnesota, I mean, they played the world pretty much in the non-conference. I mean, they were all over the place. And, Marcus Carr was the best player on the floor on Sunday, dropped 35. Cam Mack had the triple-double in the Nebraska-Purdue game, so 2 great performances from some transfer guards coming in that we didn't see the year before.
First triple-double
in Nebraska history. So, The fact that Ohio State even gave up 84 in that game, it was a little surprising too. It's not that they lost, but like defense has been their calling card, and Marcus Carr got wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Ohio State. I think, look at Dwayne Washington back here soon, hopefully. They're still the deepest team in the Big Ten. I think right now, undisputed best team in the Big Ten. I am a little worried now about Purdue. I promised I would not hit the eject button on them. They eased a lot of fears with their dominant win over Virginia, but they're having trouble scoring the ball, and I don't know if that's something that's going to persist all year. I know they need to get more out of Wheeler and Nigel Eastern. Do you think this is going to be something that kind of is a boogeyman all year, the offensive woes, or do you think they'll get it figured out? And we don't know. Harms will hopefully be back soon from that concussion, but if he's out of there, then that team looks completely different.
Yeah, I mean, the one promising sign was that Trevion Williams, played really well against Nebraska the other night. He was kind of, missing in action for most of the season. And we saw him when Purdue started to make that run a year ago. Trevion Williams became a huge part of that before it became guard-oriented with Carson and Klein. But Trevion was a big, big piece for them last year, and I think he'll have to be this year because they don't shoot it as well. Nigel Eastern has really, really struggled to score. Aaron Wheeler hasn't taken the step that a lot of people thought he might. And so, Jahai Proctor, when he's making shots, they're good. When he's not, they really, really struggle. And so I think they're going to have to rely a lot more on Trevion to kind of get them out of those scoring droughts.
I forgot to mention, we were talking about their loss to Nebraska. I wish the Bulls still has Fred Hoiberg. Look, I'm glad he's at Nebraska. I'm glad for the conference that he's in the league, but I keep remembering that he was just the Bulls coach recently, and seeing what's going on there now, I'm just like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, that definitely seemed like a downgrade. I'm just glad to see my guy Denzel starting to play again.
Is he? I can't even watch the Bulls right now. It's just such a lost cause for me. But
yeah, he was buried on the bench for a while, but he hit a big three to tie the game against the Clippers, a game they eventually won in OT, and played well the other night against OKC. So Jim Boylan, play the young guys, man. Play my man Denzel.
Miles Bridges with a monster spin cycle tomahawk jam last night. I don't know if you saw that.
We know he can do that.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. All right, before we move on to a little bit of football bowl talk, there are a few teams we haven't talked too much about yet, and just want a general, maybe not guess, but educated prediction from you on who, from kind of that middle cluster that we haven't really touched on, do you think will emerge and maybe break into that top tier in the Big Ten? I'm talking like Illinois, Wisconsin, Purdue I'd throw in there, Indiana, and we talked about Iowa. Maybe there's teams that could come and go out of that clump, but who do you think out of those teams could maybe get a bye or even two in the Big Ten tournament?
Of that group, Illinois seems like the most talented team of that bunch. I mean, Kofi Cockburn is a monster. We see the potential that Georgie has. We saw, he cracked 30 a couple times last year. Still think it's kind of a weird fit with him as the 4 and Kofi as the 5, trying to manage those minutes together. The spacing can be a little out of whack. But we still haven't really seen Io, take over games and be the NBA prospect that we all thought he would be when he came back to school. Mm-hmm. I got a huge man crush on Andres Feliz.
He's got to stop turning the ball over late, though.
Yeah, that's
one
fair.
thing, but
that's fair, but
he is very good, and he has a Kyrie Irving knack for finishing in traffic.
Hey, he is tough as nails.
Right.
I mean, the fact that a little guy like that can go up and just sky over people and get rebounds, that's all effort. And so, that's a guy you'd love to have on your team. I think they're the most talented team of those teams we haven't mentioned. Indiana with Trace Jackson Davis, obviously he's a huge problem. Rob Finnis, he's healthy, could do some things.
Devontae
Green, he's still a little streaky, but when they have it going, they could be dangerous, especially at home. I just don't know if they could play well enough on the road to actually get in that top 4.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that if Illinois would have held on against Maryland in the game they blew a 15-point second-half lead, they'd probably be ranked top 15 or 20 right now. Maybe it's one of those things where they need to learn the hard way and get over that hump, and then now the season turns around kind of like their football season went. I don't know if it's going to play out that way, long way to go, but you can kind of maybe see that in their Miami loss as a wake-up call, because that was when it probably got as ugly as it's going to get, and then things have seemed to pick up from there.
Yeah, and it seems like in those two losses, the Miami loss and the Maryland loss, late in the game, it was IO, clear out, let me do it myself. And that's just not the way to go. I just don't think that's the way to go, especially if you're going to have Kofi and Georgie on the court. Just not enough space for you to operate. I think going inside out probably works best there, especially in that Miami game. I mean, everything was off, dribble handoff or weave, everything going to the rack from there. It wasn't the 1-4, clear out, let me do it myself kind of stuff. So I think if Io and that team could kind of just play within the offense, I mean, they're going to get so many opportunities from those bigs that I think they're going to be a really, really big problem if they could be consistent.
Yeah, agreed. So we'll have to see who emerges, who kind of makes a name for themselves, and if the current teams can remain ranked as we go through the gauntlet here. Just talk some football before we wrap up. I won't call this like our official bowl preview, but I don't know if we're going to be able to get together before the games play out, so try and get to as much as we can here. Kind of like how the Big Ten has 9 or 10 teams that could compete for tournament spot. The Big Ten has 9 teams in bowls, so it's going to be a busy bowl season. We got games kicking off on December 27th, and then we got a little post-New Year's Day action with Indiana and Tennessee in the Gator Bowl on January 2nd. So nice long window there to enjoy some Big Ten football and kind of bring everyone together and root for the common cause. I kind of enjoy that every year, seeing, especially on the social media platforms, when fans all kind of get behind each other's teams and root each other on. So we'll see if it plays out like it did a couple years ago when the Big Ten, I think, took 7 out of 8 or something like that. So let's start off the top with the first game and your alma mater. Just give me 1 or 2 things we'll run through pretty quick, but something that jumps out to you about Michigan State playing Wake Forest in New York City in the Pinstripe. Because I don't know much about Wake Forest, and I don't know much about a lot of these teams that Big Ten teams will be facing. So we'll start at the top there. What jumps out about the Demon Deacons in that matchup?
Well, it's a matchup of both teams who were pretty highly ranked at one point during the year. Both kind of fell on hard times, especially on offense. Quarterback Jamie Newman for Wake, once he got hurt, their offense kind of went in the tank. He's questionable for this game. I think if he doesn't play, it's a game Michigan State should win. Kenny Willekes, Raekwon Williams both said they would play in this bowl and not, sit out for NFL stuff. So hopefully, those 2 senior guys kind of lead the way and get them a win.
Be cool out there in Yankee Stadium. I always like watching that, and it's just a nice visual. Hopefully,
and Big Ten does well in that game.
And hopefully the East Coast Spartan alums can enjoy that and enjoy the game coming to them. We'll head to the other coast now. We got USC playing in sort of a home game against Iowa. I don't know how much USC, that fan base, will get up for the San Diego Credit Union, whatever the Poinsettia Bowl used to be, or I don't even know what it's called now. But Iowa is going out west, and cool destination for them. They get out of Florida for the first time in a while, so I think they'll be pretty excited to head out there, and the fans should be as well. What do you see going up against a USC squad that, might – I just don't know where the mindset is in that USC team, that USC fan base. I don't know much about their team, so fill me in a little bit if you could.
Well, say it's a high-octane offense, like to throw it all over the place. It's a team that's 5th in the country in passing, playing a team that's 5th in the nation in scoring defense in Iowa. So your classic, Pac-12, throw it around, try to score as many points as possible against your Big Ten, Iowa, play you in the phone booth kind of game. And I think whatever style wins out will probably determine who wins the game.
All right, contrasting styles under nice weather out there in San Diego. A team that will definitely be up for a bowl game. No one likely sitting on this one is Memphis taking on Penn State in the Cotton Bowl. It'll be a cool new platform for Penn State to play on, but a big stage for Memphis to play on. So what do you see out of that matchup?
Yeah, that group of 5 team, they usually do really well in these type of games. Ever since the New Year's Six started, we're the group of 5 champ, so to speak, is obligated to go to one of these bowls. And, we've seen UCF, they've beaten Baylor, they've beaten Auburn. We saw Boise beat Arizona, Western Michigan played Wisconsin really tough. UCF played LSU tough. So even in the games they've lost, they've, still performed well. I'm curious to see where Memphis is at. Their head coach Mike Norvell left to take the Florida State job. So you wonder, just kind of where their mindset will be. Penn State's offensive coordinator, Ricky Ronnie, left to take the Old Dominion job. So you got some moving parts there, but it would be a really nice win if Penn State could get it, in a supposed rebuild year to win 11 games and win a Cotton Bowl. Like, that would be pretty awesome.
Yep, and another good recruiting class today to build on. We'll skip the Fiesta Bowl, leave that for last. It's on that same day, and jump ahead to the Red Box Bowl. Illinois is back. You mentioned it earlier in our stat rundown we did. Back in a bowl for the first time since 2014, and kind of a similar situation. Cal's not on the level that USC's been at, but they're going down the road in the Bay Area, so it's not exactly a destination for them as it is for Illinois and Illinois fans. What is that matchup going to look like? Illinois figures to be much healthier than they were at the end of the season. What is Cal going to bring to the table?
Cal, really good defense, familiar face, familiar name with Justin Wilcox as the head coach. Was the Wisconsin defensive coordinator in 2016. It was a team that was undefeated in the top 15 at one point during the year. They had some injuries at quarterback, and so they really had issues of moving the ball. Obviously, that could be a problem against the Illinois team that likes to turn you over. Obviously, Illinois has had some issues in terms of yardage and whatnot, but I think it's a game that I saw Cal was favored by a touchdown or so. I'd be shocked if the game was a blowout either way. Probably be one of those, last 5 minutes of the game. We'll see what happens. If Illinois could try to pull another one out of the fire.
All right, moving on. New Year's Day, we got Michigan, Alabama in the Citrus Bowl. I don't know if anyone's made this joke yet, but it just came to me. It should be like the sit-out bowl for Alabama, because I feel like they'll not be playing their full roster even close. I don't know about Michigan. I know they've had guys sit out in the past, but I haven't heard anything official yet. I think the Alabama roster depletion is just assumed at this point because it's their first non-college football playoff bowl since that tournament's inception. So what do you see out of this matchup, knowing that we probably don't know who we're going to see in the field?
Yeah, so I think the matchups to watch, or at least the position to watch, would be receiver. Jerry Jeudy surprisingly decided that he was going to play in the game for Alabama. As for Michigan, we'll see if Donovan Peoples-Jones and Nico Collins decide to play. I know both have been mentioned as NFL prospects if they decide to leave. And again, like you said, Alabama, just their motivation in general, to see how they are. They kind of bookend the decade with Citrus Bowl trips after a bunch of New Year's Six Bowls and playoffs in between. The last time that happened, they shellacked Michigan State. We'll see if Michigan can give them a better game or potentially even win the game. Michigan's been in Florida for a while now in these bowl games under Harbaugh. I think it's the fourth time they're in Florida in his 5 seasons there. Hadn't gone so well against Florida State. They beat Florida, lost to Florida last year. So we'll see if they can kind of break that streak and start a new one.
All right, another Big Ten team facing Auburn in a bowl. This time it's the Outback Bowl. Minnesota facing War Eagle Tigers. I think Minnesota is a better overall team than Purdue was last year when they went down and got smoked by Auburn in the Music City Bowl. Do you think they'll be able to stand up to Auburn, albeit a different Auburn team, stand up to them a little better than Purdue did last year down south?
I think so. I think they're more balanced than Purdue was a year ago. I think the Purdue thing was the classic, hey, we overachieved to get to this point. Auburn, we underachieved to get to this point. And the talent gap was enormous, and Auburn was motivated and decided to put up 56 points in the first half. I don't think we'll see anything close to that this year. I think Minnesota should be able to keep up. Got to watch out for defensive tackle Brown, number 5. I mean, that's a big fella for Auburn. He's super mobile, super athletic to be that big. So he's going to try to be in Tanner Morgan's face the whole game, try to stop Rodney Smith in that running game. So just keep your eyes on him. And if he's making a lot of plays, it might be trouble for the Gophers.
All right, Wisconsin back to the Rose Bowl for the first time, I think, since 2011. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
The 2012 season.
2012, okay.
Yep.
So still I know they're excited and pumped to be back out there facing Oregon. What are the Ducks like? Because, I just think of them always playing fast. I know Justin Herbert's talented. I still think of Oregon of, my childhood and high school days, having the flashy jerseys and the fast team. Is that stereotype still applicable to them?
Not really. And, ever since Mario Cristobal took over, he's kind of made them a defense-first team. I mean, they're in the top 15 nationally in scoring defense.
You mean Chip Kelly's not the coach anymore?
I know, it's weird, right? Nah, they still, they'll still spread you out, and they still want to, run RPO, and they still got fast running backs and playmakers all over the field. Justin Herbert still likes to throw it around, but they're a physical team. And, everybody kind of talked about how physical Utah was and how they would take it to Oregon, and clearly that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Oregon's physicality won out in that game. Don't know how physical they'll be in terms of being able to stop Jonathan Taylor. I think that could be an issue for them because we've seen them, give up a lot of points against the Washington States of the world and teams like that. And last year it was 7-6 in a Red Box Bowl against Michigan State. They're going to need a lot more than 7 to beat this Wisconsin team.
All right. Last bowl game before we talk Fiesta. It's the January 2nd game. When we think the bowls are over, we're going to remember that this one's still out there. And it's an exciting one because, Indiana hasn't got that statement win yet. I don't know if this would qualify, but a win over Tennessee is a great way to go into an offseason and a great way to close not unexpectedly, but a pleasant surprise of a season, I think, for a lot of Indiana fans. Close with 9 wins, I believe, if they close this one out. So what do you expect to see between the Vols and the Hoosiers?
So, Tennessee's a team that came on strong late in the year. They were 2-5 to start the year, won 5 straight to get to a bowl. And granted, the 5 wins weren't exactly against great teams, but hey, Indiana's 8 wins weren't exactly against great teams either.
Tennessee was in a bad spot. Fans
Tennessee
were
was
revolted.
In a really bad spot, especially blowing games they had no business losing, but they found a way to rally and credit to Jeremy Pruitt for that. Indiana obviously will be super motivated. Try to get that 9th win, like you said, which would tie a school record for most wins in the season. The fact they haven't won a bowl game since 1991. Indiana certainly has a lot of the intangibles here. The problem is when Tennessee usually plays a Big Ten team in a bowl game, it usually does not go well for the Big Ten team. We saw that with Northwestern a couple years ago in that Outback Bowl. I believe they've won 3 straight bowl games against Big Ten teams. So hopefully Indiana brings their A game and can keep Peyton Ramsey upright because that offense is really good. But Caleb DeBoer, the OC, left to take the Fresno State job. Yep. So be curious to see what that offense looks like.
All right, wrapping up, we got the college football playoff semifinal, the Fiesta Bowl. Clemson versus Ohio State, the rematch of the 2016 Fiesta Bowl. Ohio State going up against the defending champs. First of all, I don't think we'll see anything like 2016. At least I hope not, because I can't take another Big Ten shutout in the college football playoff.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that Ezekiel Elliott is the last Big Ten player to score in the playoff is saying a lot. That's definitely been a problem with Michigan State and Ohio State both being blanked in the last 2 appearances. The fact that we're even in it as a league is a good thing. 2016 is the last time the Big Ten was even in the playoff. Right. So, but like you said, I'd be very surprised if it was a blowout either way. I think this could have potentially been a championship game if we're being honest. Mm-hmm. The fact that Clemson is favored as the 3 seed, I saw they would have been like a 4.5-point favorite if they were playing LSU. So a lot of people think Clemson is still the best team in the country. You got the 2 longest win streaks in the nation. You got, Heisman finalists all over the place. You probably had the 2 most underappreciated running backs in the nation, and J.K. Dobbins and Travis Etienne. Mm-hmm. It'll be pros all over the place. I think that's going to be a really, really fun matchup. If they keep Justin Fields upright, I think that Ohio State offense could do a lot of things. That Clemson D line was amazing last year. It hasn't been as good this year. So I think that Ohio State should be able to move the ball against those guys. It's just whether or not they could stop those ridiculous receivers on Clemson.
Yeah, and I understand. I know you mentioned it could have been a potential champ game matchup. I understand why LSU theoretically moved ahead of Ohio State, winning 37-10, but at the end of the day, I really don't. Look at the full body of work. It just seems too reactionary to move the Tigers ahead of Ohio State. Ohio State still beat Wisconsin pretty handily in the champ game. First half struggles aside, I know we're 2 weeks past it now, so it seems a little outdated to be talking CFP rankings still, but I think there's a case to be made that Ohio State should have had that locked up and they didn't do anything to lose that top spot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the whole thing was based off of how the committee viewed Georgia. I think the committee saw Georgia as this elite team when really they were only elite on one side of the ball. This is still a team that lost at home to a South Carolina team that was under 500 and didn't make a bowl. But for the second straight year, you could lose the SEC championship game and have 2 losses, and people still think, hey, well, what do you think about Georgia for the playoff? I'm not sure what it is about Georgia. I'm not sure if it's the proximity, or I'm not sure
it's
if
it's just the way, like, the whispers get going and then the narrative gets started, and you know, I sound like a tinfoil hat guy, but college football Twitter and college football media is a tight circle, and once those narratives swirl, it influences, I think, the mind of the committee.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it's part of it. I mean, again, it's humans, and, you know, people say, oh, well, you know, we don't want computers. Computers can't judge intangibles and this and that. But on the other side, I think humans can get swayed by a lot of stuff.
Sure.
And so, you know, if you kind of have an agenda, or if you kind of think one way and that's just going to be the way you are and you aren't going to change, that could be equally as dangerous.
Right. And Ohio State, regardless, is going to have to beat 2 great teams to win the national championship.
Yep.
Maybe this isn't our last football preview podcast, and we're sitting here in a couple weeks talking about Ohio State's potential matchup with probably not Oklahoma, most likely LSU.
Yep.
But maybe, you know, that first they have to beat Clemson in a tough game in Arizona, and I hope they do. I know, you know, we're obviously going to root for our conference, but I'm not an Ohio State fan. But I hope they do, because to me, the contrast just at the top between Ryan Day and Dabo Swinney.
Oh, yeah, I'm still over it.
Ryan Day is has been such a likable coach just to follow in his 2 years, I guess, now that we've really had him front and center since he took over for those first 3 games, handled that with class and grace, and then faded to the background when Urban Meyer took back over. He has had 0 missteps since he took over as full-time head coach at Ohio State. Every clip and every inside access thing we've seen, every interview, it seems like he's been very pleasant to deal with, and it seems like he's beloved by his players and his team, and rightfully so. And then on the other side, you have a guy that has grew stale on me very quickly. I've been off the Dabo train for quite a while. I've been trying to recruit people to come along with me. And at this point, I think more people are kind of coming around as we see him make a big deal out of rankings and, you know, being undervalued, underappreciated, when really it's pretty accurate, because whatever perception of them, I think, is fine, because they haven't really played anybody. And, you know, I think coaches like that sometimes need to create boogeymen to motivate themselves and their teams. So I don't know your thoughts. You sound like you're nodding along, and you look like you're nodding along, agreeing with me a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm ranting now, but I'm off the Dabo train completely.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, I enjoyed the story early on of a guy who was an interim, and, you know, it was a program that was known for blowing games in creative ways, to the point where it was called Clemsoning if you did something bad. And the fact that an interim guy that people thought shouldn't get the job was able to turn that job into a national power, I think, is commendable. Unfortunately, he has become pretty obnoxious with the whole no one respects us, and if we would have lost, you know, we'd have been out of the playoff. We might have even been ranked 10th and all this like stuff. You know, you were kind of mentioning making up a boogeyman to, you know, motivate his team. Like, come on, man. I mean, you won 28 straight games. Everyone knows you're great. Everyone was saying how you need to avoid being the 2 because you don't want to play Clemson. Like, people have talked all year about how good your team is. Like, please stop doing this. No one respects us stuff.
Yeah, and I don't want to be like just a hater, because like you said, what he's done is remarkable there. It's been a awesome build-up from, like you said, a punchline at one point. And I will also say he was one of the first people to reach out in support of Tyler Trent. That's always stuck with me as somebody who clearly gives back, especially to needy kids that are either football fans or attend his games or whatever. I've seen a lot of examples of it, but I still want him out of my face with a lot of this, you know, whining and all that.
Yes.
And our team, our conference representative, gets a chance to stick it to him in Arizona. So I hope they do. We've gone 40 minutes. I think that's a record.
Absolutely a record.
I could keep going, but I think we both want to get home after a long day. So I will let you go here, and I appreciate you joining me unless you got something else to add.
No, I think that's about it. But, we're approaching the holiday season, so happy holidays to you and to all the family, and enjoy family time and good food and good football. And hopefully in a couple weeks we can talk Ohio State LSU preview and watch some good hoops in between.
Absolutely, amen. Like you said, happy holidays to the listeners, to you, and we'll be back soon.
All right, sounds good, man.
All right, thanks once again to Harold and Ed for joining the show. Really appreciate them jumping on during the holiday season. Safe travels to everyone out there, and everyone's celebrating the holidays, going home for the holidays, taking off work, whatever. Hopefully we have a holiday, edition of the Take 10 podcast, one more before 2020 gets here. Going to try and get a podcast done in Arizona at the Fiesta Bowl, going out there to provide some digital coverage of Ohio State and their historic game against Clemson, and hopefully I can track down a couple of Ohio State related guests while I'm out in the Phoenix area. So stay tuned for that, hopefully. If not, we'll talk to you regardless in 2020 with a Big Ten basketball season. There's still plenty of juice left in it, still to go. So 18 games left for every team in the postseason, and then we potentially have a national championship in Big Ten football for the first time since 2015. So keep it locked and subscribe if you have not already so you don't miss an episode. And quick shout out to everyone out there who helps make the show possible. Wes White and Julie Bronder, my producers. And one more shout out to everyone out there for listening. Happy holidays, and we'll talk to you soon here on Take 10 Podcast.